Okay guys, so today's dev talk is about basically MCP servers. Okay, so I would like to give you a basic introduction about MCP servers and how we can use them with LLM models, right? I guess most of you, or actually all of you, have heard of LLMs, right? Before, large language models like Anthropic, OpenAI, and many others, right? Like Grok as well. So MCP is basically one of the technologies that is actually booming in the market from recent couple of months, or you can say past year. So today's talk is going to be about that only. So let's start with the agenda of this talk first, what I'll be covering. So I'll be giving you guys an introduction of MCP. I'll be telling you about the MCP architecture, giving you an overview of that, key concepts and data structures. MCP in action. I'll show you a live, basically a custom created MCP server, what it does and how it works in VS Code, okay? Basically integration of LLMs with different tools like VS Code, and you can use any, you can say like LLM application, for example, Claude for desktop as well. Benefits and trade-offs and Q&A at the last, okay? So let's start. First thing is why LLM actually require any tools, right? Because we would assume that AI can do everything, right? It has access to all the knowledge on the internet and everything. It knows everything already. So then why do we need tools for LLMs now? Right, so these are like some of the examples. For example, let's say they don't have any real-time facts, right? They can't look at any real-time information. They also can't take actions on, let's say, any custom set of data or any, you can say file or anything like that, right? And let's say if you have built an application, let's say you have built an e-commerce application, for example, and you want to use that platform and the data that platform is producing and use that with, LLM, any LLM model, right? So currently, if you're not using any MCP tool, right, or any other technology, then you basically just can't do it. You're stuck to what the LLM itself can provide, right, and what it already knows. So these are some of the examples. For example, if you are booking a flight, it requires an external data or external API, for example, right? It can't do it without that. What is the weather? Needs live data again about the weather, and summarize this PDF need file access. Without reading any file, it can't tell you about the summary of that PDF or any document. So looking at all these problems, MCP was created, right? So what is MCP now? MCP is a protocol using which LLM can discover tools. It can, so basically, let's say you created or any third party created a tool. So LLM can use MCP to interact with that particular tool, right? So for example, and also MCP basically what it does is it is model agnostic basically. So it doesn't matter which model or which LLM you're using, it will be able to understand, because the format for MCP is very standardized. So any model you use, it can understand the format that it outputs or it takes as an input. So basically using agentic frameworks, for example, like LangGraph, OpenAI assistants, and etc. Okay, I'll come to that, like what is agentic model. So again, what is the core idea behind MCP is that let's say you're interacting with LLM, right? And it uses a tool, with a standardized format, that it uses as, taking the input for, MCP server. And then it gets a structured output from the MCP server, and it uses that as a context, right? So just to put this in perspective, a context is basically, for example, you tell AI, if I'm talking about a certain scenario, right? So what is the backstory behind it? So that is basically, you can say it is a context, okay? So runtime basically obviously validates, it checks which tool needs to be executed, and it returns a result based off of that, okay, whatever tool it uses. And then, like I said, LLM uses that, whatever the data, the MCP server returned, it uses that as a context, and then it moves forward from there on. So here I've written like a small analogy about that. For example, like LLM is like, MCP server is like, it's like an operating system call. The LLM asks the MCP server to do a certain task and return the data, right? So, okay. So this is the high level goal of that, okay? For example, you interact, as a user, you interact with the LLM, right? MCP runtime is nothing but, basically like the server that is running behind the scenes, okay, like the MCP server. That is MCP runtime, okay. It detects the tool which needs to be called, okay. Then a tool can do anything, okay. Whatever you can do in any, whatever programming language is basically compatible with MCP, right? Like Python, for example, or Node. So whatever you can achieve using your, core technology, AI will be able to interact with that as well using MCP. For example, if you're calling certain APIs, right? If you're interacting with a database, or let's say you are processing a bunch of files, right? So anything you're able to do, that AI will be able to do through MCP servers. It is basically just calling your code to, execute a task, okay? And then it returns a result and LLM continues with the updated context. But here's the thing actually. So see, we can also let AI, take over and execute whatever code it thinks, is necessary to, get the output, desired output. But in context of if you think about it from a security perspective, that is not a great idea. Because as because we need to validate the input and the output that LLM is getting, okay. So that is one thing. So this is like the format of a tool getting called from the MCP server, okay. So this is the structure that usually it like emits as an input for the MCP server, okay. So here you can see that it says name, right? Name is basically the name of the tool which it needs to call, okay. So in this case, it is the getWeather tool that it will be calling, okay. And then there is a object with arguments in it, okay. So for weather, like what do I need? I need a location from for which I'm asking for the weather, and I need the units, for example Celsius or Fahrenheit, okay. So these are the arguments for that. So AI is smart enough to know what values I need to pass for these parameters. Okay, that I will show you in a demo that I'll be giving right now. So it will know like what type of value it needs to pass, and also what kind of value it expects, as an input, like whatever tool it is calling. Okay, so that's something. So this is what is happening. So when that tool is called, right, the weather tool that I just showed you guys in the snippet, when it is called, this is actually what is happening behind the scenes. So LLM sees that query that, okay, this is the tool that I need to call, okay. So it predicts this is the tool, and it is passing Tokyo as a parameter, you can see, right. So what it does then, it calls that tool, right, and then it executes that function, right, whatever the function was, like get weather, that function it will execute, okay. Let's say then it called some API, some like weather API, and then it got this data. For example, like let's say temperature is 27 and condition is cloudy. Then you will return it in this format, right, or any other format. It can even be a string, okay. So you return that, and LLM will take that output, whatever you returned, right, and then it will, you can say like it will like say in a way that user will be able to understand it, not in a like a programmatic way, okay. It will be like a in a way that humans can interact, just like LLMs do always, right. So this is how it will say, like it's currently 27 degrees Celsius and cloudy in Tokyo. All right. So what is like the difference? Like I said, MCP, why it was created is because LLMs are kind of restricting in terms of what they can do, right, currently. So I've created this table to show you guys the difference, right, a high level overview of that. For example, let's say tied to a model, right? So if you're using like, let's say OpenAI function calling, then yes, it is, but it is limited to OpenAI only, okay? But in MCP case, right, it doesn't need to be any specific model. You can use any model for that, okay? So it is not tied to any model. JSON based, yes, both are JSON based only. So, and custom toolchain support, like I said, OpenAI, whatever functionality it provides by itself or any other LLM platform, right? Whatever functionality they provide by themselves, you are limited to that only. You cannot go past beyond that, right? But using MCP, that is not possible. You can give it whatever tool you want, whatever functionality you want to add it onto it, you can just do it through MCP. Okay. Open standard. So obviously OpenAI is not really, open standard. So MCP is basically, it is going to be eventually. So why should we use MCP and what makes it useful, right? In our context at least. So let's say, actually, many times actually, and also in future, you will be getting some kind of requirement regarding this, AI thing. Like you have to integrate AI into the project, right? Do something like that, right? And you need to make it interact with the data that our platform or any third-party platform is providing or project is providing, right? For example, we did this with our navigator platform, right? Captain is there, Captain AI. So we're using MCP for that, like getting the information for any, you can say like employee, right? And you can ask questions about anything, right? And it knows the context. If you're asking about, your about yourself only, or if you're asking about any third employee. Okay. Again, so I'm not going to repeat this because this is basically the same thing. Like it can work with any LLM. So and obviously like whatever tools you use, right? It brings everything together, right? Be it functions, right? Be it APIs or anything, database as well, right? It brings everything together. Scales well for agentic workflows. I'll show you that. Easy to debug and extend. Okay, so let me show you actually. So in terms, like I said, there are some security consideration and validation that you have to take care of. Okay. For example, at runtime, we must validate the input schema. Okay, like whatever input parameters we are getting, that we need to validate always, because it could be any value. Okay, you don't know what AI will pass, right? It could be taking inputs from the user as well, sometimes, in some cases. Okay, so you need to always validate the input schema. Output correctness, obviously, whatever the LLM is outputting, right? That also we need to, I guess, fact check. You can say, kind of, whether that information is correct or not. Rate limit and authentication is very important, because see what happens usually in most of the scenarios, MCP servers are basically working behind the scenes, right? You're like, there is not always somebody sitting there, looking at, the logs and, like kind of, you can say like watching for any miscellaneous patterns, you can say, kind of. Okay. So rate limiting is very important. Otherwise, what will happen? Sometimes what happens is LLM model will get stuck in a loop. If it doesn't get any desired output from a particular query, right? It will retry again, and it will keep doing that sometimes. So it is very important that we rate limit our APIs or whatever we are using. Okay. Again, like I said, never trust LLM blindly for any like real world API calls, because you may cause a lot of damage. Okay, that way. Always use sandbox and proxiness, so that you always, are in control of what, how many times any API is getting called, or, what kind of APIs are getting called. So coming back to this, like, what are some of the best practices for MCP tooling? Obviously, every tool should have only one purpose. It can't be like, you just clumped up your whole e-commerce into one function. It can't be like that. Okay. For every single, task that you want, LLM to be able to do, you define a separate tool for that. Okay, don't clump up functionality. Strong input validations, obviously, like I said, throttle API usage, because like you saw, it can sometimes get stuck in a loop. Okay. Include fallback responses, error handling, which I just showed you guys, right? If there is no response coming from the API or coming from the database, you give it some by default response. Okay. And log every interaction with the LLM, right, or the MCP server, so that what happened, when any particular query, was asked. So agentic model, like I said, these can be like combined, right? Like multiple MCP tools LLM can use at any given time. based on what desired output it wants, right? So LLM, obviously it will search, it will summarize, and then it will compose an email, okay, based on the information it got. And LLM in this case is the decision maker, because LLM will decide which tool it will call, right? So that's the thing. MCP is basically working here as an orchestrator. Orchestration is basically like when you have multiple things, and you can pick and choose like which one you want. What is the future of MCP? So one thing we already know that it is being standardized throughout all the LLM models, be it Anthropic, OpenAI, and everything. Every model is accepting that format. So standardization will be a thing, I guess. So, and native tooling and plugins we will see for different LLM models and LLM providers. Streaming we can do. For example, you asked a query, right? It generated some response. Then you want to again get some input from the user, right? And then again pass some result based off of that. So we will be able to do that like through multi-step tool call. Integration with autonomous agents, for example, AutoGPT. AutoGPT is like when interact with browsers and things like that. There, hopefully, we'll be able to get MCP as well. Okay, all right. Thank you, guys.